Birmingham was never meant to be kind. By the late 19th century, it had become a city built for production, not people. Smoke rose from its factories like permanent weather. The sun rarely reached the street intact. Everything smelled of iron, oil, and burnt coal. The ground vibrated constantly, as if the city itself were restless, impatient, angry. This was not a city that asked who you were. It asked what you could endure. Men worked until their lungs failed. Boys learned trades before they learned childhood. Girls aged quickly, not by years, but by exhaustion. Poverty was not dramatic enough to be noticed. It was simply the background noise of life here. Families were packed into houses that offered no privacy and no silence. 10 people could share 2 rooms. Disease spread easily. Hunger crept in quietly. Alcohol became the cheapest form of relief. And over all of it hung a single unspoken truth. No one was coming to save you. Police patrolled occasionally, but they did not live in these streets. Judges passed sentences without ever smelling the air of the slums. The law existed, but it belonged to someone else. When authority is distant, power does not disappear. It reorganizes, slowly at first, then violently. The Peaky Blinders did not emerge fully formed. They were shaped day by day, insult by insult, fight by fight. A boy growing up in Birmingham learned early that softness attracted punishment. Crying brought ridicule. Fear invited attack. Standing alone was an invitation to be broken. So boys clustered together. At first, it was just companionship, safety in numbers. Then came loyalty test. Then dares. Then fight. And slowly, the group became something else entirely, an identity. Names began to matter. Reputation followed you through streets like a shadow. One decisive act of violence could erase years of invisibility. To be feared was to be seen. The peaked cup, cheap, common, pulled low, became more than clothing. It became a signal, a uniform, a warning. If you saw a group of young men walking together, caps low, coats clean, eyes calm, you crossed the street, not because they were loud, but because they weren't. Silence is what frightened people most. The Peaky Blinders were not chaotic brutes. That is the mistake history often makes. They understood something fundamental about power. Random violence exhausts people. Controlled violence organizes them. The Peakies did not fight everyone. They chose carefully. They targeted rivals who needed to be seen losing. They punished disrespect publicly, not privately. They understood that pain fades, humiliation does not. A man beaten in an alley tells one story. A man beaten in front of witnesses tells 100. Their brutality was precise. It had rhythm. It had purpose. They controlled street betting, enforced outcomes, broke strikes, intimidated witnesses, and protected illegal operations, all while presenting themselves as unavoidable. People feared them, but they also relied on them. In places where the law arrived late or not at all, the Peaky Blinders filled the vacuum. They were not criminals in their own minds. They were order. Power does not announce itself loudly. It presents itself calmly. The Peaky Blinders understood this before the world broke. When the war came, Birmingham did not hesitate. It sent its boys. Boys who had grown up fighting in alleys now found themselves fighting in trenches. Boys who had learned to take pain learned now to ignore it entirely. Boys who had once feared death discovered something worse than dying, living while surrounded by it. World War I did not introduce violence to these men. It industrialized it. In the trenches, violence was no longer personal. It was systematic, ordered, scheduled. Killing was not rage. It was routine. You woke, you waited, you survived, or you didn't. Fear became constant background noise. Death lost its shock. Man learned to function while broken. They learned obedience. They learned timing. They learned how to detach from emotion in order to continue breathing. And most importantly, they learned that chaos can be controlled with structure, discipline, and ruthless clarity. When the war ended, these men returned home with medals, silence, and ghosts. But peace had no place for them. Factories had moved on. Jobs were scarce. The country that praised them in speeches had no plan for their survival. Trauma was not a word yet. Shell shock was considered weakness. So these men did what they knew. They reorganized. This is where the legend transforms. The Shelby family, as portrayed in Peaky Blinders, is not a historical record. It's something deeper. It's a psychological truth. Thomas Shelby represents the post-war man who cannot return to innocence. A man who understands that order must be imposed, not requested. A man who does not seek chaos, but cannot live without control. He's quiet because noise invites unpredictability. He plans obsessively because randomness once killed man beside him. He does not sleep because sleep brings memories. Power becomes therapy. Control becomes medicine. Not because it heals, but because it numbs. The Shelby archetype shows us something uncomfortable, that violence does not always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from clarity. From men who believe they are preventing worse outcomes. From men who believe they are building stability. From men who confuse control with peace. Power gives structure, but it takes something in return. The man who rose from Birmingham's smoke carried deep fractures. Authority sharpened their paranoia. Wealth isolated them. Loyalty became transactional. Trust became dangerous. Violence never healed trauma. It only buried it deeper. Insomnia followed success. Addiction followed control. Isolation followed dominance. Families suffered quietly. Relationships decayed slowly. The crown, once seized, proved heavy. The real Peaky Blinders, those who survived, did not grow old in comfort. They faded, some into obscurity, some into madness, some into early graves. History does not celebrate these endings, but they are the truth. Peaky Blinders endures not because of crime, but because it exposes a cycle where poverty breeds humiliation. Humiliation breeds rage. Rage organizes itself into power. It's not a story about villains. It's a story about what happens when dignity is delayed too long. Every society that produces desperation faster than opportunity creates its own version of the Peaky Blinders. Different accent, different clothes, different street. Same hunger, and that is the final truth buried beneath the smoke. The Peaky Blinders were not an anomaly. They were a response. The Peaky Blinders were not heroes. They were not demons. They were consequences. Born from neglect, forged by hunger, refined by war. Their story is not finished. It repeats quietly. Wherever men are discarded, where dignity is withheld, where power must be taken because it's never offered. And that is why the smoke never really clears.